It's moved by the Second Minister for Finance, Associate Professor Jamus.
Mr. Speaker, I understand that this motion, like similar ones I had spoken on in 2021 on contributions to the International Monetary Fund, are largely routine and technical and reflect our nation's ongoing commitment as a responsible citizen in the international system, as Mr. Indrani has also reiterated. Funding rounds for the International Development Association, or IDA, are similar and occur every 3 years. The motion before us today is to provide said funding for IDA. In my earlier contribution to the IMF motion, I had made the case for why contributing to international development efforts can benefit us by enhancing our hard and soft power, and why doing so, even when it does not, remains a moral imperative. I've also made the case for why we should systematize official development assistance. Today, I will elaborate on both of these themes, and in particular made a more pointed case for a specialized Singaporean foreign aid agency. As I previously shared, I've worked for 7 years at the World Bank Group, in the past of which IDA is a part, and during my tenure at the bank, I have contributed to the work of IDA. I also have a small balance in my self-funded group retirement account and a staff account at the credit union, but do not currently receive nor maintain any direct financial interests in the bank. Mr. Speaker, the need for us to act on the international dimension is even greater today than 2 years ago, given the challenges faced by developing countries around the world. While the pandemic is largely a matter of the past for us, and we have more or less successfully transition to treating COVID-19 as an endemic disease, the ravages of COVID remain very real in other parts of the world, especially in the poorest economies of Africa as well as Asia. In Southeast Asia alone, the Asian Development Bank estimates that the region's economic growth was dampened by close to 1 percentage point, and 4.7 million more people were pushed into poverty. This anemic growth in our neighbors will affect us too, because while Singapore's growth rebounded strongly in 2021 and remained solid last year, it is expected to falter this year, in part because of tighter monetary conditions worldwide. In our assistance to our neighbors and major trade partners helps spark better economic conditions in those places, we could enjoy the spillover effects from their belated recoveries, which could in turn offer a neat counterbalance to weakening conditions in advanced economies worldwide. Singapore has also enhanced its post-pandemic soft power. While members of this House, including those of the Workers' Party, have flagged certain refinements to our approach, assessments of our overall pandemic response and subsequent reopening have on net been positive. That said, according to an index developed by the University of Southern California, the weakest aspect of Singapore's soft power remains our international engagement. Enhancing our foreign aid profile can therefore further bolster our outreach to our neighbors and improve our foreign relations accordingly. Now, to be clear, IDA and the World Bank remain among the most effective, transparent, and development-focused institutions. If we were to decide that it is a good idea to channel financial support to multilateral development agencies, we can do far worse than doing so through IDA. But even multilateral agencies that have a solid reputation for largely unbiased foreign aid practices may end up inadvertently being subject to quid pro quo exchanges, especially between large players. Furthermore, while there's solid reason to support development in the poorest nations globally, the nature of multilateral development agencies is that their support is not solely targeted at countries in Southeast Asia, which is our immediate neighborhood. If we wish to have more directed support in a manner that could potentially spill over onto our shores, a somewhat different tool is required. That's why I wish to go a step further and explain why it's also in our interest to form a small but dedicated foreign aid agency. Much like how we already appropriate development funds for various longer-term financial commitments, one approach that can help seed the initial formation of a foreign aid agency is to set aside IMF and IDA subscriptions, along with a very modest budget for official development assistance into a development fund. This fund can then be managed directly by a foreign aid agency, call it Singapore Assistance for International Development or SingAid. The agency need not be large. Indeed, to the extent that we already have civil servants ensconced within the Ministry of Finance, whose work is, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, whose work is mainly focused on external finance and economic relations, we can hive them off to this new agency. We can supplement this professional team with a stream of rotational staff and interns, especially those who have an interest or experience with international economics. For example, we can second Ministry of Foreign Affairs staffers who deal with international economic relations to this body and then absorb a small number of university interns annually. Over time, the agency can even be an oversight body that allows us to launch, perhaps, an international volunteer corps, another initiative that I had previously advocated for. One concern that some may have about bilateral development agencies of this nature is how they may become tools of foreign policy, and consequently the aid offered becomes ineffective at best, or could even end up harming the countries it purports to assist at worst. We can preempt such concerns in a few ways. First, as I've already alluded to, we can keep the agency's mandate narrow and budget tight. This will keep the body focused on its core principles and discourage adventurism. Indeed, if we believe more in our ability to insulate such an agency from political interference than we do others, especially multilateral institutions, a homegrown institution may be an even more efficient way to deliver official development assistance. Secondly, our bureaucracy is famously effective and efficient. I see no reason why we would run a proposed SingAid without the same technocratic vigor. Aid tends to be best delivered when conditional on good policy. And we have an abundance of technical knowledge in this area, having gone through our own development journey in exceedingly rapid fashion. Third, perhaps most importantly, our foreign policy interests are, by and large, largely remarkably neutral. While neutrality is not formally enshrined as a foreign policy doctrine, we have pursued a pro-neutral approach since our independence, and our emphasis on fundamental bedrock principles such as respect for sovereignty and the rule of law, along with the pursuit of mutual interests, is aligned with this. This is an ethos, in fact, for our entire public service, and I see no reason why we cannot infuse such principles into a nascent aid agency that is likewise imbued with the self-same principles, and avoid the risk that the body descends into becoming a geopolitical tool. If anything, what I'm suggesting is that the proposed SingAid focus on providing foreign assistance with an eye on win-win economic outcomes. All that said, Mr. Speaker, it should come as no surprise that I'm in thorough support of the motion and wish that it, in fact, goes a little further.